of Norway, Her Excellency Ms. Anniken Huitfeldt, who will start our press conference with the opening remarks by the ministers. The Minister of Affairs of Lithuania, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Indeed, it's a great pleasure to welcome, I would say, my good friend, but I think a good friend of Lithuania, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, Anniken Huitfeldt, who arrived here to Lithuania with an important message of support and solidarity, not only politically but also practically. We're very grateful for the additional troops who will be stationed in Lithuania. Obviously, it is not a secret that during these days, during the last 3 weeks, when the war against Ukraine started, many of us, many allies, are discussing quite similar issues. First of all, it is how to better support Ukraine. So we've covered in our conversation that as well. We are grateful for the decisions taken in Norway when it comes to military support. We know that they are, I can say, historic decisions because the position has not changed for a very long time, 60 years, and they were changed because of a Russian attack on Ukraine. We also covered a need for additional humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, and I think that Norway's experience and possibilities could be put to a very good use in the current situation when we're seeing more than 3 million refugees who fled Ukraine. To add to that, we don't know the exact numbers. We can only guess that there are probably the same amount of people who are internally displaced still in Ukraine, and they need to be helped. We've covered the security situation in the Baltic region, where we are constantly trying to point out a strategically different situation of the Baltic region when it comes to defense. We are convinced in the Baltic states that we need to move from deterrence to a standing defense, and has to come from NATO planning leadership, that they would start looking into the region differently than they had throughout the last 2 decades. And also we talked about additional pressure on Russia, and we're grateful that Norway joined in with the European sanctions on Russia, and we expect that additional steps will be taken in the future, and that we will take European Union and Norway, they will take those steps together. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Lithuania and Norway, we are partners and very close allies. We work together in the Nordic-Baltic family. We also share the same values, and our political and economic cooperation is expanding. There is also an extensive people-to-people contact. Almost 50,000 Lithuanians are living in Norway, contributing in our communities and to our economy. As we meet today, there is a war in Europe. It's a meaningless war in Ukraine. And we are united, condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. We call on Russia to end the war immediately. But against this horrific backdrop, it's also encouraging to see how Europe and NATO come together in solidarity and also in unity. Here in Lithuania, Norway has recently strengthened our contributions to NATO enhanced forward presence in Rukla, and I visited those people yesterday. Our countries are also united in our support to Ukraine. Yesterday I visited a refugee center, registration center here in Vilnius. I was impressed by the response from your government, from civil society, and from the people of Lithuania. The welcome and protection you give the refugees is a strong symbol, I believe, in European solidarity. Norway will also do our part. Through European cooperation, we will transport 5,000 refugees to Norway, very many from Moldova, and this includes medical evacuation up to 500 vulnerable patients and with their families. Norway will also providing around 200 million euros to the humanitarian response to the war. And we discussed today how this can be organized even better from several European countries. We share a grave concern of the political situation also in Belarus, which has dramatically been changed the last couple of years. This morning I had the pleasure to meet with Ms. Tsikhanouskaya here in Vilnius, and Norway supports her fight for a democratic Belarus. We commend Lithuania's hospitality to her and other members of the Belarusian democratic forces and civil society who have fled the authoritarian regime in Minsk. Finally, I also want to mention our very good cooperation with Lithuania on the Norway and EEE grants. I look forward to strengthen our friendship and also cooperation. I hope to receive you in Oslo soon, because you invited me to Vilnius the first time we met in November, and I hope you will come to Oslo as soon as possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ministers. And now it's time to ask questions. Please approach the microphone and introduce yourself and say whom you are addressing the question. Who is first?
It's from Norwegian South. My question is for you, Foreign Minister of Lithuania. What are your expectations for NATO and their presence here going forward?
Thank you for the question. Usually in the press conferences that happen in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we don't delve deep into the tactical details of how Baltic states should be defended. Having said that, I can tell you that what we are looking into is a policy change. Before the war, many of us were convinced that the deterrence practices are sufficient because we did not believe that Russia has an aggressive intentions to the scale what we're seeing now. But now Russia has proved that it is a country ready to cross all red lines. And therefore, NATO has to take it very seriously. And we are defending NATO's border and NATO's credibility. And therefore, it has to be, with taking it seriously, the whole strategy of how do you defend the countries on the border. We're mentioning Baltic states particularly because we are here, but I have to extend that to the eastern flank. The whole defense of the eastern flank has to be strategically rewritten. And I'm very grateful, to be honest, what I hear for the words, what I hear from Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, when he says that the plans are being looked at as we speak. So we hope for a fast resolution of that.
Зараз на I have a question to Mr. Landsbergis. Europe announced
Yes, we're very happy to hear the news that Radio Free Europe is opening an offices in the Baltic states, and one of them will be here in Vilnius. We are hoping that this will allow the journalists that were working in Kiev, in Minsk, and in Moscow to continue with their work covering events in those countries. Lithuania remains an open country to everyone, to all the free media, dissidents, political opposition, if they're looking for a safe place to live and work. I have information that some other media representatives are currently in Lithuania, but whether they will choose this as a permanent place to work, it will be announced in the later stages.
And with the focus of Lithuanian National TV, I would like to ask Mr. Landsbergis a question about EU ambassadors. Today we meet to discuss about sanctions on Russia. What do you expect from this meeting? Because there is some announcements that there is some disagreements between Western countries and the eastern part of Europe.
Well, there is some, if the decisions are not yet made, that means that the discussion is ongoing. I would not call that a disagreement, I would call that a consensus seeking process. What we support in Lithuanian government, we support further sanctions, and we support further steps in order to isolate Russia, in order to not allow it to use the resources that is selling to Western countries, that the money that it gets for its resources would be used to finance its war against Ukraine. And one of the possible steps could be banning oil imports. We believe that it's possible. We believe that it's doable. Oil is easier to replace. It's easier to transport. And to add to that, it adds the biggest financial resources to Russian budget. And also, this is a plea that we hear from our Ukrainian colleagues, that we should not send money to Russia that is being used to fight war against Ukrainian men and women and children in the cities of Ukraine. Maybe you would start.
From the Norwegian news agency. My question is also to Mr. Landsbergis.
Yeah. I talk to these guys every day.
As you mentioned, Norway recently increased its troops numbers in Lithuania. If you could elaborate a bit more on how important that is in the current situation, and do you think the number should be increased further?
Well, first of all, I will tell that Norway is exceptionally good friend and ally for Lithuania and for Baltic states. That's the bottom line. And a minister being here and troops being in Rukla reinforces this alliance. It's a very important message that's being sent to the people of Lithuania. Now, when we talk about tactics, it's best that military people would comment on the troop numbers, on specific equipment that is needed. But I believe, as I mentioned before, that it's a strategic shift, and it has to come from NATO headquarters. That the situation, and actually the reality, that was before 24th of February and is now, it is a different one. And we need to take it differently. What is needed, I might speculate, additional troops, additional equipment, but also the approach. That is the most important. Thank you.
So with this, we'll conclude the press conference. Thank you very much. The ministers and very much to everyone for attending.